What's going on, everybody? Welcome to Striking Gold, your 49ers podcast on the Blue Wire Network. My name is Rob Lowder. I cover the 49ers for the Blue Wire. And joining me, my co-host, former NFL defensive back, despised as of late by Bay Area sports fans, Eric Crocker. What's up, dude?
Dude, they hate me. I know.
Bro, you were earning it. I'm not even a Warriors fan, and I was looking at those tweets going, damn, like he's going hard.
But listen, I feel like this stuff, like, you got to have fun. Like, I feel like if it's Niners versus Cowboys, me and my brother, like, you know, we're going to, like, you know, like, we're going to have that, like competition and talk trash to each other. And then, like, when it's over, right? Like, That's what you would think. But it ain't over. Like one is not over, like, because they won't let it go. They are really upset with me. And they definitely let me know in the comments. They've let me know by how many followers I've lost. But when the Lakers lost today, they flooded my mentions. And it was just like, I'm like, man, you guys were really hurt by the comments.
I assumed that they were going to be, man. Like, I was reading that shit and I'm just like, damn, man, these people are going to be furious. Like, I just know, I just know how they are, man. And what's funny too is, like, being so mad that they were unfollowing. That's pretty funny too. Cause I mean, like, I
didn't expect that. I mean,
that's truly hurt. That's truly hurt.
Yeah. Well, they're talking trash to me. And it's like, I take it. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like, it's fun to me. It's like, heck yeah, like, I like it. Like, let's go. Can't wait for the next game. But
when LeBron made that three, didn't you just tweet like, bitch?
Yeah.
Hey, man. No, see, and I get it too, because what's funny that you say that is my friends, when I, the place that my buddy that I went to for the draft, because we were doing our reaction to the first pick, and I told you, like, right when we were done with this, I'm gonna go over to my buddy's draft party that I'm always going at, and they're hardcore Dallas fans. So we're always going back and forth, and so I know exactly what you're referring to, especially when you refer to the Dallas stuff. But it was just, I could tell that you were going in hard, and I just, you have the same experience on Twitter that I do. I knew that there was definitely some people out there that were going to be legitimately offended, but whatever. So that was that, and the Warriors, obviously, I guess it's their last game. Those were games to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, they did this play-in thing, which I obviously is not cool that the Warriors ended up kind of being on the outside looking in and not making the playoffs. But I think it was genius in the sense of, like, what it did to, the actual, like, game. Like, it, for the first time, it made games, like, really matter. Like, even today, right? Lakers lost game one. And it's like, well, it's a 7-game series, right? Best of 7. So it doesn't, but, like, those games were like, you got to win. Like, you got to win one of these. Like, you got 2 chances. Like, that's it. That's part of
the value of the NFL, especially when it comes to the playoffs. Like, this is it. There ain't no series. You got your one shot, and that's it. And it is interesting to see the NBA kind of, not that, I mean, I'm not sure if that was their intention, but creating an NBA game where it's one and done.
I think that definitely was their intention.
Yeah. I mean, now what I would ask is, those play-in games, did they add additional spots to the playoffs, or did they take away spots and make them occupied by play-in teams?
So they added, if you were the 9th seed, you actually had a chance to get in. That's basically what they did.
And you normally wouldn't have?
I want to say, was it the 10th? I think the 10th and the 9th seeds. Yeah, you normally wouldn't. So I think it was basically a tournament between the 7th seed, 8th seed, 9th seed, and 10th seed. And the 7th and 8th played each other. And then the 9th and 10th played each other, which typically the 9th and 10th, it wouldn't matter, that it would just be 1 through 8 that make it to the playoffs. But that gave them a chance. And it was like the winner of 9th and 10th had to play the loser of 7th and 8th. And the Warriors, who were the 8th seed, who, in a normal year would have been in, they lost to the Lakers, so then they had to play another game, which, I mean, if they would have beat the Lakers, it would have gave them a higher seed. So it wasn't like there was no reward at all for them,
Yeah.
But yeah, I liked it. I just liked the way they went with that, with the whole thing. I thought it made the game matter, and we typically don't see that with basketball games.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm admittedly like not totally in tune with basketball. I say over the years I've slowly become a bigger basketball fan. I love live basketball. I just don't get as into it, through the TV as I probably should. Same thing with baseball. Like I coach baseball, but I do not watch baseball on TV.
Right.
I can't. Like I just can't get into it as much. But. Yeah, and another cool sports thing is I don't know how many people watch golf out there, but Phil Mickelson became the oldest golf player to win a major today, winning the PGA Championship. So that was cool to watch him do that. You're talking about a 50-year-old dude hit in one of the longest courses of the year, beating a bunch of mid-20s and low 30-year-old kids. So that was pretty impressive. But anyway, so one thing we got to say, even though this is going to be on the pod, and you're not going to know this, but we are doing our first. Now, there's a little bit of a caveat. We're doing our first live Striking Gold podcast recording on YouTube right now. But Crocker, in his infinite wisdom, didn't know that you had to, once you establish the little. It's through StreamYard, right? Like that. It's one of their things.
Yeah. Well, no, it's actually through YouTube. Through YouTube,
Okay.
You have to basically set up that you want to eventually go live on it. You have to set that up, and then once you do that, you have to wait 24 hours. Now, that might have been something I had to do, but I probably set it up and then wasn't expecting to go live at all, so I didn't worry anything about the whole 24-hour rule. But we were supposed to be going live right now on the Strike and Go YouTube page. So, dang, I should have put the link in the bio.
It's all right. I mean,
eventually you guys will
see
starting
this shit. We're just starting this shit. So, what's the YouTube channel called? Is it Strike and Gold Podcast?
Strike and Go Podcast.
Okay, yeah, so that's easy enough. So if you were listening to this, and obviously everybody watching this right now on Croc Talk TV, go to Strike and Gold Podcast and subscribe to our channel, because as far as the plans right now, we're going to do all of our podcasts live. I mean, that just means that I have to pretty up. I have to make sure my beard's trimmed. I even got a little bit of a neck beard right now. I got to square that away. I'm just going to make sure. I'm going to have to make sure I look good, because normally I just – I like to record my podcast naked, and I can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
It's unfortunate.
That's a problem. So, but anyways, so yeah, exciting things. Obviously, Croc and has been having a ton of success with his YouTube channel. I know that's been going really well. So, with that, and another cool thing is it provides us just another level of interaction with fans. They can see us recording the pod. They can interact the same way they would on, another medium through the comments. So it works well. And I'm excited to see where it goes. And we can take our podcasts and break them down into little segments. So you guys will get, the podcast broken up into little pieces and stuff like that. So should be cool, right? Should be cool.
Should be amazing. We'll make sure that we chop up the segment of us talking about the sorry ass Warriors. But go ahead.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, guys.
Dude, they're going to start unsubscribing to our YouTube channel.
I know. Sorry, guys. That's it. That was my last shot.
Just one more. I mean, they're out of it, so it don't matter no more. Season's over. But so receivers, really all we're going to talk about today is receivers. And there's a few different topics to talk about when it comes to the 49ers wide receivers. Obviously, this plays into, we have been going through our roster breakdown. We've already hit quarterbacks, we've already hit running backs, and now we are on wide receivers. So, and I would say probably trying to think of the other positions in my head. Wide receiver, probably more than any other position on the 49ers roster, probably has the most competition. Would you agree? Like the most uncertainty as far as the six that are gonna. Let's just say it is six. The six that are going to make it onto the roster. I mean, after those first two,
who knows? Literally, who knows?
I don't know. So, all right. So okay. So before we get into our position, now here, should we do the position breakdown before we talk about like the Julio Joneses and the wide receiver 3
I think
stuff?
we can talk about Julio first.
Okay. So give me your thought. I mean, you did an entire video on the Julio Jones rumors to the 49ers. And I would like to preface this with saying there has been no not a single report saying the 49ers are looking into Julio Jones. The 49ers have made calls about Julio Jones, but they've been connected with Julio Jones quite a bit, probably mostly because Kyle Shanahan worked wonders with Julio Jones when he was the Falcons offensive coordinator. So, I mean, other than that, there really hasn't been anything concrete tying him to the 49ers, but do I think the 49ers would inquire and look into it? Yeah, I do. I think they would.
Always do their due diligence.
Right. I think they would definitely be interested. It just depends on what the cost would be. So give me your thoughts on just kind of the general Julio Jones situation and what are some of the things that go through your head when you think about the 49ers doing that?
I think more so than any other name that you've kind of been or heard, being thrown around when it pertains to the kind of 49ers and maybe addressing the receiver position. Like when it comes to him, when it comes to Julio Jones, I feel like he makes the most sense. Like he's the guy that when he comes in right away, he's your wide receiver one. Now, there's another thing too, I think with Julio Jones, I think a lot of people think like, oh, he's just going to cost a ton from his contract to his, what it would cost to get him, right? Like, you start talking about the draft, pieces and things like that, the assets. Well, how much are people going to really give up for a guy who they really want out, right? Like the Falcons want to get rid of him, right, to clear up cap space. Like that's their main thing, clear up cap space. They just drafted Kyle Pitts, who's kind of like, a tweener and tight end / receiver. You also have, Ridley, who's been playing terrific. So I think they kind of went that way. Okay, let's start to get a little bit younger and let's get some of this money off our books so we can start kind of, reworking this whole roster. And when you look at Julio, 32 years old, or he's about to be 32 years old, he's coming off of a kind of an injury-riddled season where he, missed 7 games. So he had maybe his like lowest production total ever, because
right.
but he's been so damn productive. But when you start to kind of factor in everything, right, like them kind of wanting him gone to free up space and the age and the injury, I think there's a scenario where you don't have to give up a ton. I think as much as people think, right? Like in your head, it's like Julio Jones, that's going to cost you multiple first-round picks. I don't think that's going to be the case.
No, I don't either.
I think it's going to be closer to like a DeAndre Hopkins type thing where it was a running back and a second-round pick. Now, I'm not saying like that's what it would be exactly, but I'm just saying in the sense of Hopkins. I mean, when Hopkins got traded, he was at the peak of his powers, and he was like so productive, a top 3 receiver without a doubt, and much younger, and still just went for a running back who was injured, right? David Johnson, like he's injured all the time, and the second-round pick. When it comes to those situations and they start kind of, figuring out the cap and all that type of stuff, I think there's a scenario where he doesn't go for nearly as much as what people think.
No, I have always kind of been, once people started talking about trading for Julio Jones, and I started seeing people throw around what you're talking about, like the compensation for it, I don't think it's going to take very much at all. And I think if the Falcons are trying to get every other team that's talking about this trade with the Falcons is going to have more leverage than the Falcons. Like, sure, the Falcons have Julio Jones, who inevitably is, the product and one of the greatest receivers to ever do it. He's up there. Julio Jones is special, but he's on the tail end of his career. And I could even see a scenario where Atlanta is like, okay, well, we want a second-round pick. And teams will be like, okay, we'll give you a second-round pick, but you got to pay him $5 million of his salary this year. If the NFL teams, other NFL teams, knowing that this is mostly motivated by Julio Jones' salary, are going to be able to take advantage of that fact. They know that the Falcons are in a rough spot. And so it's not going to be, there could be a bidding war. There could be multiple teams, but the Falcons are just in a bad spot. And the fact that every other team that's inquiring about Julio knows that they're doing it because they just can't afford his salary or don't want to pay it. So I could see there being an instance where teams are asking the Falcons to pay a portion of his salary and then they'll take on the rest, or it just doesn't cost as much as people think. I could see Julio Jones being traded for like a 3rd-round pick, or maybe a 4th and a player, or, maybe I'm undervaluing him, but because it is Julio Jones, but at the same time, I just do not see it costing nearly as much as a lot of people think. And to kind of tie this into the 49ers, and you mentioned this too on some of your other videos in your channel, is I do think Julio Jones would be worth it for the 49ers because it's Julio Jones. He's a premier talent that would instantly like he's not somebody where you have to give it much thought. Like, yes, he's starting. He's going to be out there every play. Like, he's just out. Like, we'll work it out. Deebo Samuel, he'll be in the slot. We'll run more 3 wide receiver sets. We'll put Deebo Samuel in the backfield if we had to. Julio Jones is going to be out there. He's really one of the only options that people talk about that I could see the 49ers going after just strictly because of how good he is. You know, like, he makes sense. You get way better. Do the 49ers think they're one receiver away from competing for another championship? They could. You know, some things would have to go their way. They'd have to be a lot healthier than they were, obviously, last year. I could see why they would want to make that move. But at the same time, it's not like this, we must trade for Julio Jones type move to me. You know, you're getting a Julio Jones. It's on the last 2-3 years of his career. Maybe the injury things. I mean, you're talking about a guy. Let's go over the last 7 seasons, 15 games, 16 games, 14 games, 16 games, 16 games, 15 games. He's not injury prone, but he just had his first bad injury season. Is that a trend of what's to come, or is it just that one season? You don't really know. Given his age, you probably think it could become a trend. Given his salary, do the 49ers have to trade for Julio Jones? No, not at all. Do I think that they would be dumb not to do it? Nope. Like, if they can pull it off and it doesn't put them in that bad of a spot, we know they can afford it. We know they can afford it. We know the salary cap's going up. So there's reasons to do it and there's reasons not to do it. I really am not in a position where I feel like the 49ers need to make this move or anything like that. I could see why they would choose not to. I could see why they would do it.
Well, why do you think why would you think that they would choose not to?
Just purely for the fact that they probably don't think they might not think they're going to get much out of him. They're like, we're going to be paying this guy $10 to $12 million, $15 million this year, $10 to $12 million the next 2 years. We have 2 wide receivers that we feel like should be on the field all the time. Given the 49ers and how often they run with 2 wide receivers, now they're having to put a guy on the sideline or change their outlook towards the game just for the sake of incorporating Julio Jones. Now, again,
right, like,
it's Julio Jones. You do what you got to do. But at the same time, I could see them being like, look, like, I get it. It's Julio Jones, but I just don't think we need to. There are other ways that we could steer our team to make us better, and that would suck up most of the cap space they have remaining. And we saw how that worked. Like, the 49ers got to a point last year where they literally almost couldn't afford to sign more players. Like, they had so many injuries that they just were running out of, like, they couldn't even, they were almost got backed up against the wall. So I could see them wanting to avoid that. But, it could go both ways for me with Julio Jones. I mean, it just depends. There's so many factors. Like, are they going to be paying his full salary? If they are, how much are they giving up? I could just see the 49ers being in a spot where it just feels too forced. They could be in a position where they're working through the options and they're like, there just isn't enough of a payoff for us to do this.
Right.
It just, and I can understand that. It's not something that's just like, holy shit, how do you not do this? Kind of like the DeAndre Hopkins trade was, if that was somehow presented to the 49ers, I would be like, dude, what do you, like, how do you not do this? Like, you would be.
Would you give up your boy Mostert in a second for
you can't
Hopkins?
Make me say that live on the internet, man. Like, he's gonna see this. I mean, fuck, man. I can't. I would. Whatever. I love Raheem. I love you, Raheem.
Yeah.
So
I feel like Hopkins is like 100% a Kyle Shanahan type guy too. Physical, aggressive, just goes out, does his job, works hard. Like, he's consistent. He's always on the field.
I fear God. I fear God, homie. Like, one of the greatest quotes ever, dude.
Right. Yeah. Oh man. Yeah, he was that.
What do you think, man? I don't get, like, you think I would because it's Julio Jones. I just don't get jacked about the possibility of getting him. Like, do I think he'd make the 49ers quite a bit better? Yes. They're also in a weird situation. Like, is Jimmy Garoppolo throwing him the ball? Is Trey Lance throwing him the ball? Do the 49ers even want to throw the ball a lot?
So
because
you're
it to me seems like they want to run the ball a lot.
Yeah, so you're thinking they need to figure out their quarterback situation before they go trading assets for a guy like Julio Jones.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, even that could, that could even be wrong, because no matter who's at quarterback, you're like, we want them to just have a hella good options. Like, I don't give a shit who's back there. Give them the best options, so I can see that. But at the same time, like, just given the way the draft went, given the way the backfield looks, like, it looks like the 49ers are going to be running the ball like 60% of the time. Like, maybe more. I don't know. If you include Trey Lance and whatever runs he gives you, it could be more. I don't know. It just maybe he doesn't fit in. Somebody like
I can easily see a 55-45 split in favor of runs.
Yeah. So, it could go either way for me. I'm not hella passionate about it. It's not something I think the 49ers should do. But if they did it, I'd be like, okay. Like, it's Julio Jones.
So we're going to talk about the receiver group. And as we know, like, and you alluded to when we first got on here, like, there's two guys that we know what's up, right? Like Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk. And after that, it's just a whole lot of, we have no idea.
Right.
So do you have the list of receivers in front of you?
Yeah, I do. I got it right here.
Yeah, go ahead.
So you got, I can try and list. No, I'm just going to list. We got Brandon Ayuk. We got Deebo Samuel. Then after that, you've got Travis Benjamin, River Craycraft, Benny Fowler, who they just signed, Jalen Hurd, Richie James, Juwan Jennings, Mohamed Sadu, and Trent Sherfield, who I would expect Trent Sherfield to make the roster because they signed him kind of as a special teams. Then you have Austin Watkins, the undrafted guy they just signed, and Kevin White. So it's like,
wait a minute. You can't just skim right over what you just said about Sherfield. Because I think that's the guy that nobody is talking about. But you just kind of threw it out. You just kind of threw it out there like you expect him to be one of the six. If they keep 6 receivers, you expect him to be one of the 6.
Yeah, I do. I mean, he's a special team. It was like when the 49ers were, hold on, Kasim Osgood.
Kasim Osgood, yeah.
Like, he was always on the roster, and everybody expected him to make the roster, not because he was going to go out and ball out, because he was hella good on special teams. Right. And Trent Sherfield's pretty good on special teams. So
I've been thinking about like that with just, the return game, whether it's punt return, kick returns, and Richie James. I mean, he's definitely had some exciting plays in the return game. Return 1 for a touchdown, the kickoff return. I thought he's had, a couple other, long ones. Punt return, he's had some, really good moments. But then he's also had some low moments and some very average to below average moments as a return man. And I think you would like to get a little bit more out of your returner. And I think that's where maybe Sherfield kind of, helps take up a spot in your opinion. Do you think that, and we'll get into the rest of the receivers, but do you think that this can be between those two guys as far as like one or the other is going to make this roster? So you're saying Sherfield is 100% going to make, or you're saying you would think that he's going to make it. So do you expect Richie James to not make it?
Not necessarily.
Because I think it might be one or the other.
It really could be. If the 49ers see Richie James's primary value as special teams and they don't really value what he brings as a receiver, then hell yeah, it might come down to him or the other.
Well, that's what we've seen, right? Like, like it seems like Richie James, and I think he's very talented, and we'll get to him. But he seems like a guy who has kind of been forgotten as a guy that can be utilized as a pure receiver and do receiver things, that, as we like to say.
He's made plays.
He's always out, like he's always active. He's always in, as a kick return, punt return. But we saw late last year they started replacing him and having guys like what's his name, Craycraft, in returning punts, like replacing Richie James.
That's what I mean is, like, it seemed like Richie James was phasing himself out of his value. They started he didn't seem like he was doing well on special teams. He didn't have that return, but then later on in the season, it started to get like to a point, in special teams, in punt returning, kick returning, it's kind of a thankless job. Like it doesn't, if you return a kick, it doesn't really work almost ever. And every time they get tackled, you're like, well, why didn't he just take a knee? He didn't even make it to the 25, and then, punt returns, normally you don't get much out of it. And so, Richie James started to get talked about because of the plays he wasn't making. He wasn't fielding punts that you thought he should field. He was taking kicks out that you thought he shouldn't have. Like, he was doing the opposite of what everybody was like expecting him to do, or what it seemed like he should do in that situation. And that's why they started trying out other guys in place of him. And if you start to, for a guy like Richie James, who it seems like they're in no hurry to get him out in the field. Even as a receiver, River Craycraft was starting to get snaps later in the season that he wasn't getting. So if the 49ers aren't in a hurry to get you out on the field, and you're starting to lose your value as a special teams player, then you're in a rough spot. Yeah. Especially if your special teams was your main point of contribution, and now they feel like they need to put somebody else out there. That's tough. That's tough. And yeah, we can talk about his game against Green Bay, right? When all the receivers had COVID and he got his big game. But we talked about this. I think it was off the air. That was like the easiest and simplest big game I've ever seen. And I'm not a Richie James hater in any way. But you watched that, whatever it was, 160 something yards and 1 or 2 touchdowns.
180, I believe, in a touchdown.
I mean, but you watch it and you're like, all right,
it didn't. I get what you're saying. Like, I
don't want to sound like a hater, but
you probably do sound like a hater. But
I do 100%.
It's I get what you're saying in the sense of it didn't look like, damn, we just can't stop this guy.
No,
right? Like, you never got that. You never got those thoughts while watching it.
No,
I do struggle with the fact that, with Richie James, I think that he is so talented, and it's crazy to me because I feel like he can win at every level of the field. He can win vertically. We've seen it multiple times.
We've seen him do some crazy shit in practice in person too.
Right. He's been someone who can be a guy that is, productive, just getting the ball in his hands, right? Whether it's screens or little throwbacks. We saw the play against Arizona a couple years ago that he raced down the field 50 yards when 49ers couldn't really get anything going offensively.
That basically jump-started the game.
Right. He has been someone who, when targeted, he's pretty productive. I think his in the 2019 season, he averaged like 21 yards per catch. Last year, late in the year against Arizona, he caught a deep ball from C.J. Beathard. And it was like, he does these things and he's productive. And obviously the Green Bay game where he was extremely productive. And it's like, but for whatever reason, and I don't know if it's maybe something upstairs, but I feel like they look for every opportunity to not get him
right
on the field. And that's the part I don't understand that. Now, he spoke about it after his game against Green Bay, basically kind of saying like, it's the politics of the sports. And I understand the politics of the sports. Yep. But the one thing that's kind of contradicts that is that Kendrick Bourne was an undrafted free agent. And he's playing over you, and you were the draft pick. And that's the only thing that kind of stopped. Because I understand, like, Ayu, Samuel, like, those guys were high draft picks. Like, they're going to play over you regardless. Like, unless they just show that they suck. And clearly they don't. But Kendrick Bourne, he was undrafted. And he's carved out his role and has it where he, works into the offense. And the crazy thing about Richie James, if you really just kind of watch the games, and maybe if you even look at his snap count after games, he's on the field. He's just like blocking and then doesn't get the ball. It's so weird. It's really one of the oddest things because I think he's somebody that, again, I talked about how he can win at every level, but he also can be extremely productive in the slot. Like, he can play slot. I remember his rookie year preseason game against Dallas Cowboys. He, out the gate, got a couple catches in that game. I think in that preseason, he had like 14 catches over 100 yards. So when given the opportunity, he has been productive. I wonder why his opportunities have maybe been limited. And do you think, and I know, we start talking about him and Sherfield, but maybe this is the year where it's like, all right, there is no Kendrick Bourne. All right, he was kind of Richie James boogeyman, right? Kendrick Bourne's out of here. So now we didn't draft any receivers. Richie, all right, we didn't draft any receivers. We haven't brought in any big name free agents or anything like that. Here is the best opportunity to make an impact on this roster that you'll ever get. Do you think he takes advantage of it?
Like, I'll be positive and say, yeah, like if he truly feels like his lack of an impact was due to roster politics, we'll just say primarily, like it didn't have And again, I get the idea that there was other stuff. There's other stuff that the 49ers didn't like. I mean, but, it does kind of lead me to believe that the 49ers are ready to him. And in them, the 49ers might be thinking the same exact thing. Like, look, we didn't feel like we needed a receiver. We felt like we could have some of these guys compete to win a role. So let's just let them compete and see who wins. And that's kind of goes back to, remember when everybody was, I think it was 2 years ago, when everybody thought the 49ers were going to draft corners and they didn't draft any. And everybody was like, what the hell?
Everybody
but Eric Crocker, and you and me were both on the same page. We're like, they can't just draft a corner when they really don't even, like, that position has not settled itself yet. They want to see these guys compete. They don't know for sure what they have in them yet, and they don't just want to squash it by drafting a corner super high and then you get nothing out of it. Like, you really won't ever know what you had in those guys because you're never going to give them an opportunity to compete. And that may not necessarily be a carbon copy of the situation that Richie James is in, but he's kind of in the same situation now. Like, you have a bunch of guys on the roster, none of which like inspire any confidence. Even the former 3rd round pick in Jalen Hurd, who could be just this massive X factor. Like, Jalen Hurd could be a roster cut, or he could like compete for the most snaps among the wide receivers. Like, literally could be anywhere. So if Richie James was ever going to earn himself a bona fide opportunity to be, anytime they run 3 wide receiver sets, to be the guy that steps on the field, or anytime somebody gets hurt, he's the next guy, it would be now. But that doesn't mean that he's going to take, you asked me if he was going to take advantage of it. I said yes. So I'm going to say yes. I'll stick with yes.
But I feel like your heart is telling you no, or your mind is telling you no.
No,
I feel like
you're saying,
you're saying that just because you don't want to come off as harsh, but really you're thinking. Well,
I just downplayed his 180 something yard game as it was like I said, it was super unimpressive. So I can't I don't want to just squash everything that Richie James is and ever could be, but it doesn't feel like the team needs him. Like, that's really what it comes down to. Like, there were times last year, I mean, Deebo Samuel missed how much of the season? Half at least, and Brandon Ayuk missed a few games. And really, I mean, Richie James did come in and he had a big game, but then it seemed like the 49ers couldn't wait to get him back out off the field. Not in a mean way, but like, it was clear that they would rather have Ayuk and Deebo Samuel on the field despite a 180 something yard game. So to me, they didn't see, it wasn't like, holy shit, where's Richie James been hiding this whole time? It was like, they just, the 49ers did not seem impressed. They didn't feel like they needed him.
So you brought up Jalen Hurd, and I think he, as a wild card, do we have any expectations for him? Or do you think that he factored into the 49ers not drafting or, getting a big name free agent?
You would hope not, because that to me seems a little like bordering on negligence. Like, no, man, we got Jalen Hurd. Things are going to be great. Like, if they were saying that, then they're not that stupid. They're just not that stupid. So now, again, it's an X factor. Jalen Hurd could just be one of the most unlucky rookies to ever step into the 49ers locker room. And the fact that he suffers a bad back injury his rookie year, even after dominating the Dallas Cowboys in preseason, everybody was like, oh shit, here we go. And then he suffers a bad back injury, misses the entire season. And a back injury is no joke. You can't just if a guy tears his ACL, once he could walk again, he could still be in the gym working upper body. And, you mess up your back, like, that's it. You ain't doing anything, so it's not like you can work through that. And then he comes back into, he's in shape. Everybody's kind of positive about where he's at. He comes back in and he tears his ACL, the very next thing. So is he brittle? Is he injury prone? You wouldn't really think so, just given the way he played in college. I mean, the dude was a former running back and did not give a shit about contact. Right. Even as a receiver, was like, it benefited him because he was perfectly willing to block. And
I loved how, and you and I both, we messaged each other. So our love affair, our friendship started with kind of the DMs about Jalen Hurd and kind of watching and talking about what we had seen from him. And, we walked away, I know I did for sure, very impressed by the type of skill that he had. Everybody was like, hey, Jalen Hurd, he's this just raw prospect. And he's so, and it's like, what are you guys watching? Because what I'm watching is somebody who is a really good route runner, especially for somebody that's 6'5", 230 pounds. And he gets in and out of his breaks, and he was fluid, and I didn't think he had any stiffness. He had good feet. Like it was like I could see exactly why Kyle Shanahan really likes this guy. Then you start talking about the physicality, and I really feel like everything since Dante Pettis that Kyle Shanahan has focused on is like toughness, like grit, grind, and you see Jalen Hurd, and it was like, man, he exemplifies all that. And then it's like, well, all right, that's cool. But let's see if he does it in the NFL. And then his first time being active in the game, I mean, just, a few catches, 2 touchdowns, like runs through people. And it's just like, oh my gosh. Like, damn.
Yeah. And he ran that safety over for that 1 touchdown.
Yeah. And then the back injury, and it's tough. But I want to say maybe he's not the sole reason why they didn't go out and, really focus on that position or adding something to it. But I would like to think that he had some kind of, effect on their thought process. Not saying that he is the reason, but I think it's just like, hey, let's give it a chance and let's see, and, there are people, they're going to throw out some of these names, right? I mean, I've seen it in the comments as we're doing this live, and, Golden Tate and, some other guys that people might think. And to me, it's like, I need to see what I have from these young guys first, just like we talked about with the cornerback position. Like, I need to see what I have from Richie James first. I need to see what I have from, goddamn Jalen Hurd, Juwan Jennings,
right?
Before I go out and try to address the position with somebody like Golden Tate or any other free agent that might be available.
And to me, like, all the talk about a wide receiver 3 is kind of silly. Like, now, I'm not saying there's no use in it. The 49ers, even though it won't be that often, they still run 3 wide receiver sets. And they'll run 4 wide receiver sets where Kittle is one of the slot receivers and stuff like that. Now, but for the most part, the 49ers are going to have two receivers on the field.
They are heavy 21 personnel.
Right. Team. And if they're not, they're 12. Like they love 2 tight ends. They're never favoring the wide receivers. Not that it'll never happen. So to me, like people talking about all these like
Jamison Crowder. I just see him in the comments.
You're gonna pay a guy $11 million to see like 30% of the snaps, 40% of the and it's to me, it either moves the needle a lot or you don't do anything. Julio Jones, I could understand, because if Julio Jones on your team, he's on the field and you work out the rest of the shit. You'll figure it out. But it's Golden Tate. What does he give you? In what way does he make your team better other than he's a receiver that gets on the field every now and then? And if somebody gets hurt, you've got a competent guy stepping in. That, to me, is more important than the wide receiver 3 part of things, because they're already at 3 receivers that are going to be on the field almost all the time in George Kittle, Brandon Ayuk, and Deebo Samuel. If everybody's healthy, those are your 3 receivers. Your wide receiver 3, if you want to call him one, is Deebo Samuel. I feel like this is kind of Brandon Ayuk's receiving core now. So what are you really gaining in a wide receiver 3 other than maybe a little bit of insurance and an impact every now and then? Now, Kendrick Bourne was a wide receiver 3 and, among the receivers, and he had a big impact. He was definitely a part of that offense. So I say that, and Kendrick Bourne's kind of the exception. I just don't really see some type of big move for a wide receiver 3, like moving the needle at all. Like, it just doesn't, I'd rather than paying somebody a lot of money or giving up draft capital to get one, you give Richie James his shot. Now, they were about to trade for Deshaun Hamilton, which makes sense. That's a guy that he's not getting paid a lot of money. They were probably only going to have to give up like a 5th round pick, maybe 6th round pick for a guy that was about to get cut. And obviously and I have a high opinion of his skill set, but that's kind of the situation where it makes sense because you're not paying him a lot of money. You're not giving up a lot to get him. And if, the fact that he's going to be on the sideline for 60% of the time, that makes sense. That's okay. But if you're going out of your way to trade for, what was the Jets guy everybody keeps talking about?
Crowder.
Yeah. Like dude's making like 10 plus million a year. You'd have to give up a decent draft pick to get him. Now if you're going to wait for him to get cut, because a lot of people think he's going to get cut, for salary cap stuff, then that makes a little more sense. But
even
you're
then,
still having to pay him.
Yeah, you're gonna have to pay him, and even then, it's if the other guys don't work out, right? And we haven't even talked about Mohamed Sanu, and I mean, and that's another guy where I get it. We saw him last year. He was there for a week or two, and then they let him go.
Right.
But I do think that he's someone that when you look at Golden Tate, it's like, well, we have Mohamed Sanu, that they're kind of similar in that way, where they're both guys, like you said, they're not going to play a high volume of snaps. And, they both can come on the field. I feel like, say Debo goes down, or, I'm good with it being Ayuk and Sanu being your, 1 and 2 heading into that game, So, I mean, those are definitely things that, I think is being overhyped a little bit, that conversation of the wide receiver 3.
Yeah.
Do you want to read? We got a super chat donation from Teron Lewis. We appreciate that. And he says, I think the 49er fans are worried about the wide receiver room because of the injury history of our current receivers. If Debo misses time, who are we starting? And thank you for the contribution. But I think that's where we get back to, what about Sanu? And I think I'm fine if Sanu has to start. He's somebody who, one, you don't have to teach any other offense to or anything like that. He knows it. He comes in, he understands his role. When you start to look at what Kendrick Bourne was to this offense, I think that definitely, Mohamed Sanu can be that type of guy. And again, I feel like he's the insurance. I think when you look at, like, ideally, it's like, hey, we want it to be Richie James. We want it to be Jalen Hurd. We want it to be Jawan Jennings. But in the event that none of you guys work out, well, we have Mohamed Sanu, who we know exactly what we're getting out of him. And again, he doesn't have to go into the season as the wide receiver 1 or anything like that, right? This high volume target guy. He just has to play off of George Kittle. He just has to play off of Debo, Ayuk, and even Kyle Juszczyk. So I do think we're making a bigger fuss out of the wide receiver 3 position than what it probably is in the building, because they're not a heavy 11 personnel team that runs around with 3 receivers. If we were the St. Louis Rams, I think that would be a much different conversation that we're having right now. A team that definitely, plays with 3 receivers on the field at all times. Crazy, they run the same offense as 49ers for the most part, like similar concepts and principles, but they do it with a 3rd receiver instead of a Kyle Juszczyk.
Yeah, I agree with you, man. I just don't think it's that important. And to me, the conversation about the genuine wide receiver 3. Remember, we're talking about receivers. If you're talking about the product on the field, then we're really talking about, you can call it the 4th option, because George Kittle's the first one. And I think this may be a year where Brandon Ayuk competes for George Kittle when it comes to the impact in the passing game. I'm not saying he competes with George Kittle for impact when it comes to just overall, because obviously George Kittle does it all. But I do feel like this is a year where Brandon Ayuk is going to push George Kittle for how many receiving yards they have. I think that Brandon Ayuk will get close. And to me, the conversation about the 4th option, it kind of resembles a little bit to me the conversation about your backup quarterback. Like, we need a really good backup quarterback. And you're like, well, if you need a really good backup quarterback, then you got other problems. Like if you need a really good 4th option, then you got other problems, because people are getting hurt, and it's not to say that teams shouldn't have good depth that can absorb an injury to somebody like Deebo Samuel, who may be injury prone. We'll see. So I'm not saying it's the 49ers shouldn't care about their 4th option in the air. It's just that it shouldn't necessarily be something that you're paying a lot of money to, or you're giving up a lot of draft capital to get. It's just, and the reason we had the Julio Jones conversation is because you're not talking about a 4th option. You're talking about the number 1 option,
like, the option.
Yeah, like all of a sudden, like Julio Jones is on the field, and so that I can see, because it changes the landscape of everything. Like all of a sudden, Julio, like you have a genuine wide receiver 1, but making a big move for somebody who doesn't even, that may not even be better than Ayuk or Samuel, then it just doesn't. There's not a lot of need there. It could happen quick. Injuries. The 49ers do not have good luck with injuries, but
Well, we have Sean here, and he says KB played more than Juice. 49ers play 3 receivers often. And I'd say a lot of, Kendrick Bourne being on the field more than Juszczyk might have had to do with the 49ers injury issues at the receiver position. Ayuk missed 4 games. Debo missed I think Debo, I don't know, how many games did Debo play in? 5 games?
I got it.
Maybe
I got it
6?
right here. They got this weird like pop up on the screen.
Yeah, so
he only started 5 and played in 7.
All right, so he played in 7 games, and one of the games he got hurt on like the first play. Was it what game was that where he grabbed his hand? The Washington football team.
Literally the first play.
Yeah, he played. It was like one play, and then he was out. So we are talking about kind of a different situation where KB was kind of forced into that. Ideally, you don't want KB to have to play as much as he did, but I think at their core, the 49ers want to be a heavy 21 personnel team, and it's 21 personnel with an asterisk next to it because Juszczyk is kind of like, he's a fullback, but he's also a tight end in a sense because he is a pass catching guy as well, kind of run routes and does those things as well. So, those are, when we start talking about Kendrick Bourne, that.
Is there anybody else?
We haven't talked about Kelvin. We haven't talked about Benjamin at all.
Travis
Travis Benjamin.
Yeah, I mean,
step in as number 2. And I'm looking at the comment by Teron Lewis, and it's like Benjamin. I think how he's kind of viewed is much higher than what his production has been over the last 5 or 6 years. He's kind of been resorted. I think the way we look at him, because of what he kind of maybe was in like Cleveland, as like this guy that stretches the field and he's like a deep ball threat, and maybe he has a little bit of that with the Chargers. But as of late, he hasn't been this productive guy that you can kind of count on or you say, oh well, he does these things extremely well.
Well,
I always look at
in
him
2019, he opted out in 20. In 2019, he had 6 catches for 30 yards. In 2018, he had 12 catches for 186 yards. In 2017, he had 34 catches for 567. So 2017 was his last season with the Chargers, his first season with the Chargers, that really had any sort of an impact.
Right.
To me, he falls right in line with all of these other wide receiver options that you just have no idea what to expect. And should you be relying on them? No, you can't.
And that's not to say that he can't be productive. That's just as far as like how they're probably thinking about him, or at least how I'm thinking about him. He's there.
And that's just the end of your story. He's there.
It does seem like they want that type of guy, right? Like that guy in theory that stretches the field, that is a speedster. Last year they did sign JJ Nelson, right? They did sign Tavon Austin, and that was in the absence of Travis Benjamin. So it looks like they are going in that direction of wanting someone that does win vertically in that way. And, even if it's not for anything else, but to, pull secondary and kind of open up things for guys underneath. Maybe they do want Travis Benjamin, for something like that. But for what he has been over the last few years, it's not, like you said, 6 catches for 30 yards or whatever. Like, you know what I'm saying? But for, the comment by Teran, and I'm not calling you out, Teran, but wide receiver 2, that's a little rich. As far as Benjamin goes. Now, Sanu, I could see it. But
he's saying if we're banking on Sanu or Benjamin to step in, then we're in trouble. I don't think anybody's banking on them to step in. It could be a scenario if somebody gets hurt. But again, it just comes down to, do the 49ers have a great third option at receiver? Not really. But they also shouldn't invest a crazy amount of assets to get one. It's just, especially in that offense, it's just not hugely important. I mean, it not to say it couldn't get them in trouble. It's just, you got to walk a fine line between, like you said, somebody was talking about calling the Jets to trade for I keep forgetting his name, but it's like, why would you do that? Like, you can't trade draft capital and pay $11 million a year to a guy who you want to be your wide receiver 3/4th option in reality because of George Kittle. So, I mean, is there anybody else on this group of receivers? I mean, Benny Fowler, he's just more of like a veteran guy. I don't know if he'll make the team. Again, Jalen Hurd, a little bit of an X factor. The stars could align.
Who's your six? Who's your six?
Okay, let's do that. We'll get there. I mean, we've been on for 50 minutes. So, Brandon Ayuk, obviously. Deebo Samuel. Man, after that, it gets so hard. Mohamed Sanu, I'll go with Mohamed Sanu. But again, he's not it. So the disclaimer from here on out is, and I have no idea after that. So Brandon Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. Let's go Richie James. Trent Sherfield. Okay. That's 4. Let's go Jalen Hurd. I already said Mohamed Sanu. I might take that one back now that I see it all.
I don't think you have Sanu right now.
No, I kind of mentioned him.
You mentioned him, but not in your count.
Yeah. Then I'll go Austin Watkins, the undrafted guy. Like, I mean, the 49ers always find some crazy undrafted guy, and I don't necessarily think he's a Kendrick Bourne per se, but he has some traits that could
Kendrick Bourne is the exception. Now, he is more physically gifted.
I'm not patting myself on the back, but I thought Kendrick Bourne was special, like, right away. Like,
hold on. When you say special,
better than what he is, or what's projected to be. Because I never like the fact that once I saw him play and run routes in person, and the way he was catching the ball and the way he just carried himself, like just the eye test when I'm standing on the football field watching him, I was like, this guy's got something. And when I say special, anybody that can go from an undrafted free agent to earning a pretty significant free agent contract is special. You're in the NFL. You're fucking special. Like,
this is why Kendrick Bourne is special. Kendrick Bourne, first of all, he was extremely productive at Eastern Washington.
And he works his ass off.
He was extremely productive. There were 3 receivers: him, Shaq Hill, and Cooper Kupp. And all 3 got opportunities in the NFL. Obviously, Kupp was a second-round pick. Shaq Hill went undrafted, but I know him because he's from Stockton, so that's a little homie. But he spent some time with Tampa Bay. But Kendrick Bourne, extremely productive, but went undrafted. And the funny thing about, because it seems like a Kendrick Bourne type thing, Kendrick Bourne left early. Like, he didn't even have to leave yet. But it's like, of course, Kendrick Bourne leave early. And I think we saw right away that he was someone that had potential, right? I mean, in the first preseason game against Kansas City, he had the long touchdown. And then he had the 2-point conversion where he jumped over the dude and made the contested catch. And I see, a comment from Cleveland Scott, and he said, KB flashes, but is not consistent. But I'd say KB was extremely consistent with what he was. Now, did he have that game, right? I think even this part was consistent, where he'd have that one game a year where he just dropped a bunch of passes, right? But for the majority of the season, I thought he was extremely reliable. I thought he showed up in big moments. I thought, when 49ers were in the playoffs against the Vikings, he caught several bailout passes. I say several. He maybe only had 3 or 4 catches, but every catch mattered that he caught in that playoff game.
He had some game-sealing catches.
Yeah.
And
I mean, the game against New Orleans where he caught 2 touchdowns on 3rd down, and it's like, if Bourne doesn't make those catches and you kind of look at how the game played out, do the 49ers win that game? So to say KB is, inconsistent or even too many drops, which he doesn't. Like in 2019, 49ers were like, oh, 49er fans, he dropped so many passes. And it's like, he dropped 3 passes. He just dropped 2 against Seattle, 1 that went off his hands and ended up getting intercepted for a touchdown. And I think those are the key moments and things that jump out, especially this last year. It was either against, he had one of the worst first halves ever against, it was either Arizona or Washington football team, where he had 4 drops in the first half.
Yeah, right.
And it's like people they'll take that moment and like spread out throughout the whole year as if he had drop issues all year.
I feel like anybody that doesn't like Kendrick Bourne, when the first thing they think about when they think of Kendrick Bourne is that drop pass against Seattle that turned into a pick 6.
Right.
That's just the mindset they have towards him. Because obviously they're not wrong. He did do that. But if that's all you remember from his career with the 49ers, and that's kind of like crazy for me, He was, for what he was, an undrafted free agent to make a roster is crazy. But he got in there at the right time. The 49ers were in a rebuild. He got in there. He carved out a real role for himself. And he was, to me, like, he wasn't inconsistent. Like, he was like their rock. Like, you always knew what you were going to get from Kendrick Bourne, and the 49ers leaned on him in a few games. And he was hella good in the red zone. I mean, one year he had just as many touchdowns as George Kittle. So George Kittle obviously gets all the praise he deserves. But Kendrick Bourne had a very real impact. And,
I think people, I don't know what they're saying with him. Like right here, you see he had more than 3 drops in 2019. I will bet money Kendrick Bourne did not have more than 3 drops in 2019. He dropped 1 against Pittsburgh. He dropped 2 against Seattle. He did not have a drop for the rest of the season. I'll bet money on that.
Yeah, and I don't know where that comes from.
And you guys know, I
Crocker will go back and watch every snap of Kendrick Bourne's career. 1, because he'll enjoy it. 2, because he'll get you to prove you wrong. And this is the same guy that had a bet real money on Kendrick Bourne to get 45 catches, and he did it. By 1, right? Didn't he get 46?
It was I think he ended up with like close to 50 or 50. Yeah,
well,
but it was
46 is close to 50.
But it was close.
Okay.
It was close to. Yeah.
So, I mean, we don't need to go off. I mean, we don't need to turn this into the justice for Kendrick Bourne.
He's not even on the Niners anymore.
He's not. But it was just, he was, like you said, he was an exception. Like his role in the offense, he made himself. And a lot of his role came from, like you said, injuries. Would if Kendrick Bourne have been that much of a factor if Deebo Samuel stayed on the field? Probably not. But again, he is the reason you have a decent wide receiver 3. And maybe Richie James can be that. Maybe Jalen Hurd can be that. Maybe a veteran like Benny Fowler or Mohamed Sanu can be that. We just don't really know. There's a lot of competition. So I said my 6. You gotta say your 6 now, Croc.
All right, I'm gonna go with Deebo Samuel.
Okay.
Brandon Ayuk.
Okay.
Richie James.
Okay.
Mohamed Sanu.
Okay.
Jalen Hurd.
So you think they're only keeping 5?
Yeah, and I'll stick with 5.
Okay. All right. So, yeah. And so you don't think they're keeping Sherfield, walking? I mean, there's nothing. Oh, my God. He doesn't think they're keeping Sherfield. It's not a big deal.
I can see it, though, especially if they want to keep 6. And
yeah.
Joey, I will show you the stats. He dropped 2 passes against Seattle. He dropped 2. I'll show you. I'm going to bring it up right now. Go ahead, though. Keep talking.
He'll say those are lying, too. Does anybody keep track? I mean, somebody keeps track of drops. But so, yeah, I mean, to sum up the wide receiver position, obviously there's just a ton of competition. Could this end up being a season where the 49ers do the same thing they did with Emmanuel Sanders, where they're kind of rocking and rolling? They're not really completely comfortable with the receivers they have, and they go out and they trade whatever they gave up for Emmanuel Sanders, a 4th and a 5th, something like that, to get somebody like that who can step in and have an impact right away. I could see it being like that. I think the 49ers are hoping that someone out of this group emerges as a bona fide 3rd wide receiver / 4th option, and they can kind of just cruise into the season. And as always, as with any team, can cruise into the season hoping everybody stays healthy. Oh, Crocker's showing it right now. Does it say drops?
Is it focusing?
A little bit. I don't see where it says drops.
It's right. Hold on. I'll put it at the very end. I'll try to zoom in on it. Hold on. Let's see.
Oh, drop. Yep. 2019 3.
You see it?
Yeah. Was that the season we're talking about?
Yeah, that's the season we're talking about.
Okay.
2019 3, 2020. What does it say? 5?
5 and 18, 3 and 19, and 6 and 20.
6, and 4 of the 6 in 2020 came in that one game against Washington or whatever.
That's 6 drops on 74 targets, 3 drops on 44 targets, and 5 drops on 66 targets. So we're not talking about like a shit ton here, but So, yeah, like I was saying, I mean, I think the 49ers kind of like how they did with corner a few years ago, and it worked out for them. They just want to see how this position shakes out. And obviously, they are tying a little bit of hope into Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk staying healthy. But again, you can't forget about George Kittle. If you're thinking about a depleted passing offense, you can't forget about George Kittle. He's an option there. So I don't think the 49ers are desperate to find that fourth option as a lot of people think. But again, this could be another year where the 49ers, I could easily see the 49ers coming out of the gate pretty hot. They're playing a fourth place schedule. All of a sudden they're, at midway point of the season, which there really isn't one anymore. Maybe they're, 7-2, and they're like, hey, we're making another run here. Let's call around and see what kind of veteran guy we can get in here, like an Emmanuel Sanders type thing. And I could see them doing that, but I just don't think at this time they're just, and a couple of people mentioned in the chat, maybe somebody gets cut that they feel like they can land, and maybe they're waiting to see how other rosters shake out. Because a lot of the other teams are a lot tighter against the salary cap than the 49ers are. So they could be waiting on it, or they could just be, like we said, just waiting to see what the competition shakes out. And maybe they know something we don't. Maybe Jalen Hurd is 100% ready to roll, and they don't think that he's going to have that bad luck again. So, I don't know. What are your general thoughts on the whole group?
I definitely think they're going to kind of take a wait and see approach. I really liked how you compared it to 2019 when they eventually went and got Emmanuel Sanders, and it was clear at that point that needed to be done. I think I even wrote an article on it. Like, 49ers want to take this offense over the top. They need to go get either AJ Green or Emmanuel Sanders, and they ended up going to get Emmanuel Sanders. But I thought that made a ton of sense at that time. You're talking about a team that was 7-0 when they made the trade. And it was like, look, we're in the opportunity. We have an opportunity here to get even better at this position where we're kind of lacking. And maybe some of it had to do with, the quarterback kind of being up and down to start coming off of a torn ACL, talking about Jimmy Garoppolo. But it seemed like as Emmanuel Sanders got there, Jimmy Garoppolo got better, and the offense just kind of took off a little bit more, from a passing standpoint. So I could definitely see that this year. Don't really try to see, what do we have with this group? Is somebody going to take over? Is somebody going to take control of, a third spot or even, a fourth spot? I do think we at least have one guy that can kind of give you more of a level of consistency with Mohamed Sanu, and they probably know exactly what they're going to get out of him. So who's just going to be some of the other guys? And I think they're about a legit. And I mean, we didn't talk about like Kevin White and stuff, but I think you probably think that is down to, Richie James, Juwan Jennings, Jalen Hurd, maybe Travis Benjamin, and you kind of see who ends up kind of taking control. And if they all just suck, then yeah, you go out and you probably do something that you didn't really want to do. But I think they're going to give it time to kind of see how that all plays out.
Yeah, I think that's smart. I think there's probably a lot of guys around the league that could have an impact that are available, and they just don't need to force it. They're not desperate for anything right now, but could they solidify things a little bit? Yeah, but I think they want to see who gets cut. They want to see, you got the June 1st stuff coming up. Once June 1st hits, if you don't know, June 1st is a major escalator when it comes to contracts, and there are contracts that can come completely off the books after June 1st, or stuff like that. So there could be some June 1st cuts coming around the corner, and the 49ers want to be in the mix of that. And they just don't feel like they have to rush it. And the 49ers, we know the 49ers will make a move if they feel like they need to make a move. Like, they have no problem trading for the third overall pick. They have no problem trading for D Ford, Emmanuel Sanders, Trent Williams, and you just keep on going. So if they feel like something needs to happen, they can make it happen. But there's not really an option out there right now that's like, they must do this. It's just – a wait and see approach isn't necessarily the wrong thing to do here. So,
especially for a team that's, again, like we talked about earlier, so, heavy run game and everything kind of works off play action.
True.
And we look at the receiver group, but you definitely have to factor in George Kittle into the whole equation and how he's utilized as their number one primary guy. So where most teams are kind of looking at like, oh, we got, three receivers, right? Or wide receiver 1, 2, and 3. 49ers are looking at it like, well, we have three targets. And I think that's a better way to look at it, right? George Kittle, Ayuk, Deebo Samuel. You look at it that way, I think it makes you a little happier about or a little more optimistic about just the position in general.
Right. Well, and then what Teron mentioned, he asked if we talked about Benny Fowler. And I mean, so if you don't know the Benny Fowler story, the 49ers like a week ago signed Marquise Lee, former Jags receiver. At one point was pretty prolific. He looked like he was going to kind of take off and have a career, but that kind of fell through. The Jags are kind of loaded at receiver. He got injured, stuff like that, to where it kind of fell through. The 49ers had him on the roster for like a few days, and then they just cut him and signed Benny Fowler. So I don't know what was going on there. I mean, I didn't necessarily expect a huge role for Marquise Lee. I don't expect a huge role for Benny Fowler if he makes the roster at all. Like, even Marquise Lee was not a guarantee to make the roster. So, and just given how quickly they cut ties with him, obviously something was up there. I don't know. I don't want to speculate. I don't know. But, they parted ways with him, signed Benny Fowler. And to me, that kind of just says, like, we just want guys here. Like, we need some guys in here to run some routes, catch some passes. So I don't necessarily think there's a whole lot to talk about there. Benny Fowler has never at any point been a huge deal on any offense. The most he ever did was, 350 yards and 3 touchdowns in Denver. And I'm not hating on the guy. It's just, you wouldn't expect him to carve out a huge role with the 49ers because he's never done it anywhere else. So, and this is like his 7th or 8th year. So I don't know, man. I think that probably sums it up, right?
Yeah, I think we're good.
All right. So, hey, what we're gonna do is, like we said, we couldn't run this on our new Striking Gold channel because of that little 24-hour rule. So we're gonna take this video from this broadcast and we're gonna put it over there on that channel. So if you're watching it back, you can see it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. Striking Gold podcast, brand new. Technically, this was our first one on YouTube Live. It was just on Croc's channel because of the weird rule. So make sure you guys subscribe to it. We're going to be on there all the time. We're going to be doing everything on there. Croc's going to be dicing up the episodes, kind of breaking them up into little tinier videos, kind of like what he's already doing, with his channel. So, and he's been doing a great job with that. So I'm excited to see where it's going. Thank you to everybody who stopped by. I mean, hell, we were right up against like 100 people there for a while. So I appreciate that. Just be expecting this. Be expecting this to be a normal thing now. We're going to make it happen. And it was only a no-brainer, too, because we're already on here at our computer talking 49ers. We might as well do it with I might as well do it, on YouTube. So I don't know, man. You got any closing thoughts?
No, I appreciate everybody coming in. Appreciate everybody tuning in, watching, and we appreciate the super chats, of course. Thank you guys for all the support with everything that you guys do. You guys are awesome.
Yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the channel that you're on right now. Croc Talk TV. Obviously, Crocker's doing his thing, and he's got big dreams. And go head over if you haven't subscribed to our Striking Gold YouTube channel. Go do that, Striking Gold Podcast. Follow us on Twitter. Our handles are our names. Y'all know the deal. Rate, comment, subscribe, like, hit the bell. I'm just gonna keep a huge list in front of me of all the little things you should say at the end.
And listen to the podcast on Apple.
Yeah, and listen to the podcast on Apple, Spotify, and Stitcher, whatever. We just got this massive list of stuff you guys have to do to support us. So hopefully you like us, and we've earned that from you. But hey, you already know what it is. For another episode of Striking Gold, we are signing out.
Peace.